You're listening to Empress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Yeah, yeah. Empress. Join us next time on the next episode of Empress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.empressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Empress Conversations with Maggie. Today, my guest is the lovely Miss Shan-Nel Simmons. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Maggie.
Absolutely. Such a pleasure. Shan-Nel is the owner of Nel Finance and Shan-Nel is the owner of Nel Tax and Financial Services. Now, you are the lady we need to talk to right before tax season is upon us.
Yeah.
Do tell us how you got started in your journey.
Yeah. So back in 2000, well, before 2016, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always knew that even as a corporate accountant, I had loved taxes. I worked in dealing with different corporations and such, and different industries, and was always a part of handling like their sales tax in multiple states and helping putting together the corporate returns, etc. So I knew the IRS eventually was going to be the end goal. Then I got with them in 2016 as a revenue agent, working with self-employed individuals and small businesses that had assets up to $10 million all across the country, and doing their audits and looking at their books and records and trying to determine how much they were going to owe or not owe, being in charge of different programs such as their offshore disclosure, doing some fraud cases, partnerships and TEFRA, you name it. I was doing all of that. And then so much so that while I was there, I was also entrusted to become an on-the-job instructor very shortly after being there. So I was also training other agents in doing the job and learning taxes. So all that to say, I just kind of was like, okay, I'm doing all of these things. And, you know, it's like, if I'm doing all this, can I be promoted? But around 2014, there was a lot of shutdowns, furloughs, everything that was going on with the country. With everyone being laid off around 2008, 2009, it finally trickled to the federal government around 13, 14 and such. And, being furloughed and everything at that time, I was like, and having a shutdown at that time, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to, deal with this and everything. And I knew my worth. So I said, okay, I'm gonna figure out this plan. I actually registered the company's LLC name is Nel Tax Help. So I registered the LLC then, even though I was still with the government, registered the LLC right away. So that way it was already in the works, and just started slowly building my exit plan out. Then September 30th of 2016, that was my last day. I remember having lunch with all my people that was working there and stuff. They did not want me to go, but I was like, yeah, I'm leaving. So with having a 1-year-old at the time, but then November 7th, I was my first day of starting my business. And shortly after that, changed the name to Nel Tax and Financial Solutions. And, I've been rocking and rolling literally ever since, serving clients and businesses all across the country, as well as in some of our U.S. territories, such as Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So, yeah, it's been a blessing.
Wow, you are such a gifted woman, Shan-Nel. Tell us what it was like, because you mentioned that in the beginning, the end goal was working for the IRS.
Mhm.
And then that, you reached your peak and you're like, no, this is not it, something else. So what was it like for you when you were going along your professional career here and then realizing, no, there's got to be something more to this, and making that switch?
So the thing was, I was going to quote unquote retire from working with the IRS. So like, even though I said like the IRS was the end goal of being employed was the IRS. But I had always knew eventually I was going to work for myself.
Okay.
Initially, it was to be with the IRS for 15 years. That's what I came in with. I was going to be there for like 15, 20 years, right? So I was going
Okay.
to stay for a while and then like leave and then start my own practice and everything much later. I stayed for 7 years. So, and I honestly did not want to go. I kind of fought to stay. And I thought it was interesting because, um, you know, between the budgets, which was outside of the agency's control, that's Congress, with the budgets. And then even with that, even though they acknowledge, your reviews are great, they're giving me, outstanding performance awards every year that I'm there. I have people coming down from headquarters shadowing me to try to find
Wow.
best practices within the
Wow.
agency, right? All these things, but I couldn't get a grade increase, right? So it's just like, yeah. And it was it was literally, and I served on the union board, so helping others while I was there as well, get some of their rights and everything protected, but yet nothing was happening for me within. So it just became, yeah, I gotta go. And
Yeah.
when you notice doors just closing, no matter what all you're trying to do, no matter how outstanding you are, and you notice the doors are just closing, 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 that's when you have to realize there's another door that you're supposed to walk through, and you just have to be okay with walking through it. And I did that. And me, unlike other people who have the privilege of being able to work in their job and then start their business and then kind of work them congruently, I had to walk away completely because it's a conflict of interest. You can't
Mhm.
work for the IRS and doing taxes there, who are enforcing and doing the oversight. And then you're also representing people before the IRS, which is what I
Mhm.
do now, and helping them with their cases and their audits. And you can't do both. So it literally had to be, you have to walk away from this. And I had to have the faith to be okay with walking away from that and knowing that it was going to be okay. And mind you, I had a whole 1 year old.
Full 1-year-old,
A
a
whole
full
1 year old. And
wow.
I had to just be like, okay, I had to cut off that source of income and know that it was going to be okay.
Chanel, God is funny like that sometimes. And the fact that
Absolutely.
you waited 7 years, you completed that assignment, whatever
I
it is
did.
you're supposed to have learned, whatever connections you made there, whatever it is, you completed it. And it's funny because now it's like you were gently being squeezed out, but in reality, you're like, I have a kid who's only one. I need this income. There's so many things that can keep us locked in, even after that 7 years is like you were done. But sometimes because of what we look at with our natural eye, and you're thinking, no, I got to stay here because the mortgage needs to be paid. And then it just gets worse and worse from there. But I would like to also let our listeners know that you are a multi-published author, and you actually penned a book probably inspired by that experience, Faith Walk from Employee to Entrepreneur. This is a great segue to talk about it. So
Yes,
let's
yes.
spend some time here.
Yeah, so the book is Asking for Success and is my faith walk, from employee to entrepreneur. And what I purposely penned that book 1 year after being in business. And I did that intentionally, more so because not only just to share my story, but more so I didn't want to get to a place in my entrepreneurial journey where I look at my first year of business with rose-colored glasses. Because I find whenever you talk to those who have been in business for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years or whatever, when you ask them when they started their business, um it's very similar answers because they're so removed from it. They're very much so like, oh, just keep going. And all of that is true. But they're not honest about the challenges and some of the insecurities and the questions that they had during that time period because that's not their reality anymore. Right. So I purposely wanted to make sure that when I talk to entrepreneurs, um, as I continue being one, I had something that kind of served almost as a time capsule of everything I had to deal with internally and externally, when I decide to make that transition from being an employee to an entrepreneur. And it's there and it can't be tainted by, my memories or just new experiences and stuff. It's just there in black and white. So, in that book, I talk about Matthew 7:7 through 7:8, which, for those who are not familiar with that Bible verse, that's the one that talks about, ask and it'll shall be given to you, knock and seek and you'll find, all of that, right?
Yeah.
And the most important thing I had wanted everyone to kind of take out from that book, which is what I personally did at that time, is that although yes, it takes a courage, it takes faith, you have to do actions if you want the blessing to come into your life. You have to. The whole, faith without works is dead is so true.
Yes,
He
yes.
meets you halfway. So even though I was not sure what was going to happen, I knew that I was literally walking away from my main source of income and everything at
Mhm,
that time.
mhm.
I also, like I said, I put the business name in 2 years before I was 100% sure. I knew it was coming, but I wasn't sure when I was going to pull the trigger. I want to say in August, I did my very first professional headshot.
Wow.
Um, so uh, I started putting in the business cards. I talked to the UPS store to get the POS box, to get the PO box, right?
Right.
I was doing all the things, and then it became one day in September. I said, "Okay, now it's time to put in a 2-week notice." I kind of knew it was going to be in September, but I wasn't 100% sure. But it was like almost one more. I was just like, "It's now." Because if I don't do it now, I don't know exactly when, but it's now. And I
Mm,
did it. And then my job was completely shocked. They were like, "Oh my gosh, why are you leaving?" They were like, "Is there something we did wrong?" I was like, "It's not." I had to let my manager know, like, it's not you, and it wasn't. I was very fortunate. I had a really great manager while I was there. So it was not my manager, but it definitely was just things that were bigger than my immediate supervision. It was agency wide. It was
mm,
nationwide, literally. Some of the constraints that was imposed upon the agency at that time, as far as promotions, hiring freeze, lack of grade increases. You couldn't move even laterally, you couldn't move horizontally. They wanted you to stay literally just in place and head down, do the work. And it was like, I could do that, but I was always been a person where I'm like, I have more talent than that. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. So so um all that to say, when I decided to make those changes in
yeah.
that book, I also made it very much so a workbook.
Mm,
I provided, so I share my story, right? It's definitely my story, but then it has reflective questions for the reader. And it's a short read. It has reflective questions for the reader to ponder over. It's 3 sections. I talk about my marketing, my initial marketing of how, and I was very fortunate. I will say, I hear a lot of people on these internet streets talk about their friends and family not supporting them. I was very blessed in that I've always had my friends and family support me from the very beginning and to this day. And the support comes in very many different ways. So I challenge some of you, really look at how your family might be supporting you. They may not be online shouting your business everywhere, but every time they might go to church or go to work, they might be bringing you up whenever someone has a question about what it is that you might provide, right? Or
mm,
they themselves may not use you, because a lot of, I have cousins, they don't use me necessarily for their taxes. They already had tax people before I went into my business. But anybody that they know, they'll recommend me a lot of times to come for their services or whatever. And then of course I do have the few family members who will share the posts, do all of that. And then of course, just I would say lesser friends and family who have actually used me. And
mhm.
that's okay, because what you're out there for is to get clients. It's
Yes.
not about friends, family. You're out there to get clients,
Clients, yes.
period. A client could be a friend and family member, but a client honestly is just who is willing to pay you. That's what you're willing, that's what you're, and who are you meant to serve? If you
Mm.
focus more on that, you will be better off and okay. But yeah, my marketing strategy, I just was like, I'm gonna just go out at having a network. Oh my gosh, those initial networking and just trying to figure all that out. Which is literally just go out and just be ready to talk about what it is you do when someone asks. That's literally the bottom part of networking. And
Exactly.
just and yeah, it was just all those initial things of having to realize that I will say the biggest thing in that book, that I will also impart with you before we move on in our conversation, Maggie, is just that um, everything that you've gone through up till the point of when you decide I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to start my entrepreneurial journey. For those of you who have not been entrepreneurs before and you're leaving from work and being an employee to pursue entrepreneurship, everything you've ever learned will come into play. I have worked customer service jobs, and
Hmm.
those and working retail. Those of you out there working retail, let me tell you something. You have a master class of what it takes to work with people. You know marketing better than you probably know, and you know conflict resolution a lot better than most.
Yeah.
So, those of you who are in retail, let me tell you, everything you've ever learned in retail is going to be priceless. Because I've had to use my retail skills, I had to use my customer service skills, of course, the accounting and working in corporate spaces and
Mm,
all of that. All Every job I have ever had has
mm.
had its place in my entrepreneurial journey, and I am 100% thankful, even for the worst of them, of what I gathered from them, because I recognize I needed every single experience to help me for where I'm at right now.
Chanel, that's so good. That is so good. Let's kind of circle back here because you dropped so many gems on us right now. If someone who is in a stage of life where they are really contemplating, they're young, they want to start out and branch out, but with your experience in your previous career with the IRS, or someone who's perhaps a seasoned entrepreneur, what's the number one thing that you see clients do repeatedly as a mistake that you have to go in and correct?
I would say, on the in the tax world and financially, honestly, it's
Yeah.
just not understanding your money.
Mm, okay.
Believe it or not. And the reason why I say that, or not understanding exactly what it is that you do. Seriously. Um, so let's say you have someone who has a rental property. You would
Okay.
think that would be easy enough, right?
Right.
But then as you start talking to them, you find out that the rental property is in a whole nother state. You find out that they actually share that rental property with another relative. You find
Oh.
out that it was inherited it with someone else. So you find out all this other information, and a lot of times the person didn't realize they needed to share all that information, because what ends up happening is that just from just what I just put out there as example, a lot of times that will require different treatments of maybe how the income and or expenses would be treated because of your particular circumstances. So I would say the biggest mistake a lot of people have is they have to understand and please recognize that when you go to your financial professionals, whether it is your bookkeeper, your accountant, your banker, your insurance provider, tax professional, you really need to disclose to us everything. And trust me when I tell you, it's a confined space. We are professionals. The conversation is confidential, in the sense of confidential in the sense of that we need what you're telling us as far as like who's involved, how you got the money, how you're spending the money. We need to kind of know the ins and outs, because if we don't know, what typically then ends up happening is the government has ways of seeing on the back end what you more than what you believe. I'll leave it at that. And they have access to it. They have legal access to it. A lot of people think that, by doing things via social media and doing things like via Zelle and Cash App and all that they don't see it. Okay. I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna just leave that there. Take that with you as you will. I'm gonna leave that there.
Mm.
Just know that. And I'm gonna just say okay.
Mm.
And they have access to it. They can see it. Um and therefore, if they find out, it becomes a whole nother problem. It's so much better to be the person who proactively disclose. I always so like the IRS loves telling the story about Al Capone and how they that FBI tried to get him. See, everybody tried to get him, but it took them to nail him because he evaded taxes. And seriously, Al Capone could have had a whole kind of criminal enterprise still going had he paid his taxes. Had he disclosed that he had the money, they would have been fine. And whatever else he was doing, and eventually they would have, of course, gotten him for other things criminally eventually, but he wouldn't have went down like he did had he paid his taxes and disclosed. So that's why I tell people on the financial side, it's just so much better to just let us know what's going on. Now, I don't condone, criminal activity, but I'm just saying, I'm saying to you, let
Support.
let us know what's happening. That's that I would say that's the biggest one. And then I would say something on a smaller end. Um, if people are not actually like sharing all of what they did or didn't do during the year, the other biggest one would just be being too modest with their expenses. Um, I would say that's another one I think that hurts a lot of people. And and the modesty comes sometimes from being disorganized, just not keeping track of everything. And a lot of times just saying, "Oh, it's not a big deal." But here's the thing. Major corporations keep track of every single coffee lid that they purchase. They
Mm.
make millions and billions of dollars, but
Mm.
they keep track of how many paper clips they pay for and pens they pay. Seriously, because it adds up. And here you are, making, maybe multiple six figures, not, in the billions and the trillions of dollars, but you're willing to, turn your eye to something that you're paying $20 a month for. That ends up being $240 of less income that would have been taxable.
Makes sense.
So, it's just so and then you do that to several things, that could have
It
been
adds up.
$1,000, right,
Up.
of income that you could have shielded from being taxable. So, keeping track of all of the expenses that is necessary for you to operate your business activities, crucial, because you're literally leaving money on the table when you don't.
Wow, that's so good. That is so good. Death and taxes, the two things that are guaranteed in life. So you're
Absolutely.
gonna pay one or the other. You may as well get it right on both ends, right? So
Absolutely.
wow.
And then they're gonna tax you on dying, so there's that.
Oh Lord, no. How did you know that?
There's that.
Goodness. Can't get away from it. Oh my goodness. So tell our listening audience where they can find you. You are based in Maryland, but tell us where they can find you and what type of clients you work with, please, Shan-Nel.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So it's neltaxandfinancialsolutions.com. I'm also on Instagram. So it's NTFS Global on Instagram and it's NTFS Global on YouTube. So those are like the main social media channels, but mainly the website is where you can contact me best and schedule a consultation if you want to work with me. I work mostly on IRS representational cases, and that's just dealing with if you receive a notice from them, if you owe any back taxes, if you haven't filed for a while, or if you are under audit and you need someone to represent you and or your business. I am here for you. um, any business, so it could be your LLC, it could be a partnership, an S corporation, or a corporation. And then moving more so into the space of working now with personal finance and working with family members, working, and when I say family, all types of families. So, this could be, whether you have children, not have children, whether you are looking to get married or not, whether you are a caretaker of your parents and or your aunts, uncles, and such. Everyone has different financial needs to be considered. So, basically what I do is I help, coach you through that and counsel you and expose you to resources that can assist you with whatever your financial needs are in your journey when it comes to dealing with yourself and your family and preparing for like retirement, all that good stuff. And then lastly, a lot of education is coming up right now. As a matter of fact, I'm working with families of little ones with under five, and just teaching them the importance of not only having financial literacy for the family and the parents, but how do you introduce that to little ones at such a young age? So I've been doing a lot of different workshops right now with that, and just more educational spaces, and whether they're that's an in-person workshop that I'm doing right now, but then also two online workshops as well. So
That's powerful. Start them young. That's the way to do
yes,
it. That's perfect.
yes.
One more question here. Because you're based in Maryland, do you
Mhm.
work with clients outside of this within the 50 states, or do you just specifically work with clients within Maryland?
No, I as an enrolled agent, I'm licensed to work with anyone within all 50 states of the United States, and I've also worked with clients that was in Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. And then I also work with clients who are U.S. citizens, but they may have assets in other countries. So, and they still have a U.S. filing requirement, but then of course, they may have things that are over there that would be considered foreign income. So, yeah,
The late great Tina Turner was a U.S. citizen, and she still paid taxes here before she left and relocated and started living in Europe. So, yeah,
absolutely,
that's another famous case where she was doing living that fabulous life.
absolutely.
One other thing that I wanted to ask you here, because our focus here is taxes. I love your company slogan, which is "Your taxes solved." I mean, you can't imagine the mental stress and
Mm,
fear, anxiety that someone is going through, even if they miss the first year or whatever they owe. It is a lot because that organization is scary for a lot of people.
yeah.
So you taking on that burden for your clients and being that person who's going to fight and speak on their behalf, that is such a relief. And I love that it's your slogan is your taxes solved. That was perfect.
You. Thank
That
you.
was perfect
Thank
indeed.
you. Yeah, I mean, that was honestly one of the reasons why I left the service. Like in addition to, of course, wanting to value my worth, um, I knew it, and that's what I think was what made it I needed to trigger it early, simply because I would sit across from individuals, whether at their kitchen table or after the intimidation tactic of the seven lawyers on this side and the four CPAs on that side of the boardroom, and here I am, the one federal agent, and then they would slowly, leave the room, and now I'm just left with the taxpayer and maybe the main attorney and the main
Mhm.
CPA. And the conversation, whether it was the boardroom setting or the kitchen table, was always the same. It was, if I had someone like you that was helping me with my tax situation, I would have either not owed, or it
Yeah.
would be far less, or I would have at least understood why we were in this situation. I actually had taxpayers who owed the IRS while I was there when I worked their cases, who literally wrote my manager, and I still have the notes. The manager notes, thanking me for their experience, even though they owed,
Oh, wow.
because at the end of the day, first and foremost, it's important to, understand that most people want to get it right. I've
Yes.
always understood that. Most people always want to just get it right.
Yes.
They're not trying to cheat the government. They're not trying to do whatever. They just want to get it right. Right. Secondly, but they do want someone who's willing to consider them fully and try to make sure that they keep as much legally possible in their pockets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a balance and that's a dance. And honestly, it comes almost down to an art. And you have the folks out there who, you're just a number and people can feel when you're just a number.
Yeah.
And then there's, folks like myself who, because I'm not alone. I have some peers who are in this game who operate kind of the same. That we take our time to get to know our people, find out what all is going on, and then put together the best case that we possibly can with the facts and circumstances that are provided to us. So and I stress the facts and circumstances simply because sometimes, although, even though and that's why I was very careful to say your taxes solved. I won't say fix. And the reason why I purposely try to avoid the word fix is simply because sometimes I walk away from a case and you may still owe. I hope a lot of times it's less, but you may still owe. And it's only because of the fact that, whatever we were working with before, at that time it was what it was, can't change the facts and circumstances of the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I always tell my clients is now is a new day and we're starting from scratch. And we're
Yes.
gonna get it right going forward. And
Yes.
you're in good hands now. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Shan-Nel, I have to kind of to paint an overall picture here to our listening audience. You deal with money and taxes, which is it can be a challenge. And then also you have a gift in the area of public speaking and have published books on both topics. And there is a third baby in the work. So talk to us a little bit about that book.
Oh my goodness, there's actually babies.
Babies. There we go. There we go.
They're babies in the work. Money Talks is an anthology that I was a part of. And that book is actually coming out this week. And it's the third volume of that book. So in that book, I basically talk about just what you can do when it comes to taxes that most people don't believe they have the right as the everyday citizen to do. So that a lot of folks who are, many would consider more privileged exercise all the time. And one of those is writing to your senators. Every senator in every single state has an email address. So if you find that there's something happening, whether it's on a federal level, state or local level, that you don't feel is in your personal best interest about the taxes and then it impacts your, email them. That's what they are. Their job is they are representatives. They are not the final voice. They represent you.
Yes.
So, therefore, it is their job to speak on your behalf.
Yes.
They're not supposed to just speak off of what they want and what they're running off of. They're supposed to speak for you. So therefore you give them what you need to be said and you exercise your right and contacting them and making sure that they're actually working in your interests, right?
Right.
So I go on that a little bit in that book as one of the tidbits. And
Well,
then
let's uncover that a little bit. Why
yeah.
is it that one group doesn't feel it is their right and then another group uses that like it's running water? Why is that difference so big, so large between those two groups?
I honestly believe it's because of skin in the game. I
Mhm.
believe because one group actually add money to the political PACs of the people who are there, and the
Mhm.
other group, don't realize that their tax dollars do the same. Like their tax dollars don't add to their political campaign funds, but it definitely adds to their paycheck. And
Yeah.
I don't think that they realize that. And they don't realize that, you have just as much skin in the game as someone who is funding someone's campaign.
Mm.
Um, and I think, and also too, just politics, just in general, and government hasn't really been taught as much as it used to be. So I just think a lot of people just are really not aware of just the fact that you know us as citizens, you're in the United States, you're considered sovereign. You have the ultimate voice and ultimate power. That's what our Constitution says. So therefore, everyone in that White House and on the Capitol, in the Supreme Court, they technically answer to the citizens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But people just don't realize just how much power you as a citizen has. And trust me when I tell you, Congress is never going to let you know that. Because it
Wow.
doesn't work in their individual interests.
Mm.
So.
Wow. You know, Shan-Nel, with all these things that are going on and changes coming up in 2024 with new tax laws, how do you stay abreast on all 50 states and all the different changes and laws that happen every year? How do you keep up with all of that?
Continuing professional educational credits.
Wow.
um, there's that, but there's, well, one, IRS tax law is federal, so it's just one set of laws. So on a federal level, it's everybody answers to one set, right?
Right.
Although I have the ability to represent all 50 states, and I've actually, I will say, I've had clients so far in about 22, 24, somewhere around there,
Mm-hmm,
states. I don't regularly work with everybody. So, like basically it's always like, well, as far as on the state level, I don't do every single state yet. But and then also too, you have to remember some states, there's 5 that don't have any state taxes at all. So there's that. So all they're answering to is the federal side. So that already brings you down. So like I'm roughly at like half of the country I've worked with and I've done. I have clients right now, I would say in roughly about 20 different states. So they're the different state laws. A lot of them, what they typically do is most of their laws are they just run off of whatever the federal government does for the most part. Their credits and everything that's on the individual state level, because most of the people, depending upon where they live and where they work, um, they may only qualify for certain credits. So,
mm,
so although some states will have many credits available to them, like, Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, Ohio, Michigan, those are some of the ones that'll have, Florida, they'll have a lot, and New York. Oh my, New York and California are just their own two. New York and California just need to be just their own two, two tax worlds by themselves. And I work with both. Um, you know, those are some of the ones where, yes, there's a lot of changes a lot of times. But again, when this is I would say in any industry, when
mm,
it's something that you enjoy doing and it just it clicks for you, it's not it it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift. And you know what it takes to stay in the game. I've even though I didn't have to concern myself too much at it when I was in the IRS, some of the deductions, particularly income taxes that would be on Schedule A on a state and local level, I had to make sure that I was aware. Because if someone was taking a deduction for it, I had to make sure that it was a credible deduction for the state and local. So even then, I always had to be aware and I always had to, in those cases, were coming from anywhere and everywhere across the country as well. Um, Working on my own for the past almost 7 years, um, it's just literally just always just making sure, whoever I have, some states I work with, like I said, all the time.
yes.
Others, if it comes up, it just becomes, I'm very resourceful. You got to know your resources. Just look it up and apply accordingly, depending upon and this goes back to knowing your client.
Mm.
There, and that's how it kind of all comes together.
It does come together, right?
Yeah.
Chanel, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation here, what would be your final closing thoughts as so that our audience can have that aha moment with you? And then please do share your contact information so our listening and watching audience can contact you for their tax needs and
Understood.
financial services. Yes, please.
Okay. So I will say this. I know right now in this country, a lot of people are upset that they have to pay taxes, particularly those who are considered middle class, those who I would say that are around like the $75,000 mark, and I would say under 400,000, right, as a household. So,
Mhm.
like, if you're in that spot right now, I know you're feeling it because most of the tax breaks are either going to those who are in poverty or those who have higher net worths or are involved in more higher income generating activities, right? But here's the thing, I will say that um, when you are paying taxes, it's because of the fact that you actually have money. Seriously, think about it. The ones who are getting all these breaks because they don't have money, listen to what I just said. They don't have money. And the
Yes.
ones who are getting breaks because they have higher income generating activities,
Mhm.
typically what they have done is they have put their money into different activities that allows them to receive money at a different tax rate than just working a job
Makes sense.
and or having a business, because even having a business will be subject to the same tax rate as just having a job. Like the investments and, looking into other ways of generating tax-free income for right now or tax deferred income for right now. So some of those things are available to the everyday working person. Um, you just have to be willing to get creative and look for it. But then also too, you got to also, it starts at the polls. I can't say that enough. And this is not about party affiliation or anything. It starts at the polls. Vote in your interest. Look at who, I don't care what party they're part of. If they're coming back, how have they voted in the past? If they voted on tax bills that were against what will be for your family, then I would strongly question, do you want them back again? Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to vote against your interests. So, and this is on all levels. You got to also start paying attention to your local politicians because the local politicians have more of a daily impact on your everyday life than federal. We got to get out of that habit of only looking at politics when it comes to a presidential election. You got to start looking at politics all year round on all levels because it's always going to impact your pockets and purses every single time. So
Yeah.
you really need to start paying attention to that. Um, but I will say to you is this, those who typically are not paying taxes, the ones who, who look like they're very affluent,
Mhm.
they're leveraged. Many of the times, what they're doing is if the bank or whomever came to them today and asked them to pay for everything that they have borrowed today, they wouldn't be able to do it because they're kind of using borrowed money to take care of some of the expenses. And even though their things are making the money, it's not enough money to pay back the money that they've borrowed.
Oh, wow.
So therefore, I will always tell you,
Mhm.
I always tell anyone, what you see may not be the full picture and may not be completely financially healthy. And you, my friend, at whatever level you are, may honestly be more in a financially healthier situation than someone else just because of the fact that if someone asks you today to pay for everything that you owe, you would still have money left. So just always be mindful, all because of what you see, it may not be the full picture. Just worry about building up your individual empires and just be worried about making sure that whatever makes you feel successful, what makes you feel wealthy, that's what you're going after. And that's what you have. Don't worry too much about what they have, what you don't have, whatever. Just worry about what's going on in your pockets, and then make sure that the people who say that they're for you are truly for you, and making sure that they're protecting you and your household accordingly.
Well said, Shan-Nel. And one more time, how can our audience get in touch with you?
www.neltaxandfinancialsolutions.com.
And email and social.
Email, the general email is info at nel, is a info at NTFS. So it's N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, global.com. So info NTFS global.com. And then the social media, Instagram, NTFS Global, and then YouTube, NTFS Global.
Shan-Nel, thank you for taking care of our taxes and getting them solved. It was an absolute delight to speak with you today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're listening to Empress Conversations podcast with your host, Maggie Peary. Conversations with Maggie. Yeah, yeah. Empress. Join us next time on the next episode of Empress Conversations with Maggie. To learn more about guests or for more information on working with Maggie, go to www.empressconversationswithmaggie.com/get-started.